Hi. So in this video we'll discuss about the integer class. So integer class which supports both integer values and float values. So here we will discuss what is an integer class and how it is different from other programming languages, and also we will discuss in detail about how these integer and float classes can be used for different set of values, and how types of formats are used here in Python for integer and float classes. Okay. So now looking into this detail of this one, the first thing what we need to know here is, see, in the other languages depends on the magnitude of the their values. Okay. So we will be having a kind of long integer, and having different type of integers, integer data types in the other programming
languages. Now, whereas Python here, all that you have to do is you should know the value, what value you are going to pass. You need not to bother about any of the data types. So if you pass the value, it automatically chooses the appropriate size. So Python has an ability to choose an appropriate size automatically for given values. And it also uses to represent a 0, positive number, and also a negative number. That's what I told you: short integer, long integer, and unsigned integer. Any kind of thing can be passed here. Okay. And not only that, it also supports the integer numbers in the format of binary, octal number, and also in a hexadecimal number. If you're interested in using binary, then you use B radix, and also for octal we use O, and for X we use it for hexadecimal. So like this we can represent the numbers in any of the formats, an integer format or anywhere, any other format. Even binary, octal, and hexadecimal also can be used here. Okay. Now this integer class has some details over there. So the integer class includes a default constructor because it does not has any parameter. So the integer class is having a default constructor, and by default the integer class is ready to provide a value 0. So when you use an integer default constructor, that returns a value 0. And also the integer class having parameterized arguments, a parameterized constructor. So we have some parameters to be used here. Based on the parameter that give us the value. Yes. So for what type of value, what value could be written over here? So now here for the argument, in the argument of this parameterized constructor of the integer class, we can give a float value. When you give a float value, the value will be truncated. Only the whole number will be returned by the integer class. So integer constructor. So whole number only can be done. All other numbers, after decimal number, whatever is there, that will be it will be removed from the program. Okay. And also we can use a string. Okay. A valid string. For a valid string, it provides the corresponding integer value. So the string values also can be used as an argument into the integer class, but we need to be careful what type of string we are using. If we are using invalid string, then it will raise an exception called value error exception, so which will terminate the program abnormally. In order to avoid this, be careful of what type of string that we are using. Ensure that the kind of supported string in a combination of numbers only, we are using it in the parameterized arguments. Okay. And the same is also we can do it in the form of a binary or in a hexadecimal. So where we convert the binary number, we are passing the values into the constructor,
in the format of the given format in the binary way. For an example, if you are giving the binary value, we can specify 0 be 1 1 1 0 like value can be passed, and here we can specify what is the type of value we are going to use. If it is for binary, we can use 2. If it's for a octal, we can use 8, and for hexadecimal, we can use 16 like that. So like this, we can specify the different types of numbers also in the integer class. Okay. And also we can use the integer class for a float values also. The float also is having a default constructor where it does not have any arguments, and it returns a value 0.0, whereas integer it returns 0. The float returns 0.0. And also the float can take different arguments as well. So like your integer argument, float also can take some arguments. If it is an integer value, then float class it returns a float value, and even for a valid string, it produces a float value also. Okay. Then also next, if we look into it, the floating numbers also can be used to represent the exponential number. Got it? So 3.14 e power 15. Got it? So that is similar to expressing 3.14 into 10 power 15. So like this, we can represent the floating values in Python as well. So here we have learned that integer class is having a default constructor, parameterized constructor, and also the number representation in various formats. Even we have a float class which has a default constructor, parameterized constructor, and its corresponding representation. Okay. So now let us look into an example to know how to use these constructors and classes and methods corresponding to it. Okay. Now we can see that this is an integer class. So here we have a default constructor, and this is a parameterized constructor, and this is a floating value. We are using it inside the int constructor, and also the value of more magnitude is being used into the integer constructor, and a string of numbers are passed as a value into a or parameter into an parameter constructor of the integer class. And now the binary values are passed here, hexadecimal values are passed here, and similarly octal values are passed. Even the same thing can be represented in different format as we have specified. Now we can convert an hexadecimal number into an integer number, similarly the octal number into an integer number, and also we have float default constructor, and also we have a float with parameterized constructor. I have commented this line just to indicate that so this kind of strings are not allowed for parameters into a integer parameterized constructor, and this will raise an error. Value error exception will be raised by this statement over here. Now when we execute this program, we will get an output here where default constructor returns 0, whereas parameterized constructor it returns the same integer value. And when a float value is passed, these two values are truncated and it returns only the whole number. And irrespective of the magnitude, whatever that value we give for that corresponding integer value is provided. And also if we look into it, a string of numbers are passed and the corresponding integer value is produced here. Then also we are converting the binary value into integer value. So for 0B1010, the corresponding integer value is 10. And similarly for a hexadecimal number, we are converted into integer, that is 65,535. Then we have an octal number. For octal value, the corresponding decimal value is 46. When hexadecimal number can be represented as a hexadecimal combination, and they specify the radix, that is 16. So that will give us what is ABCD in integer, that is 43,981. Then also we have an octal number. Octal number is specified by using the octal radix. So that is 8 over here, and that's corresponding to 668. Similarly, for a float default constructor, it returns a value 0.0, and for a float parameterized constructor, it returns a value whole number with including a 0 over here. So 5 is given here and it returns the value 5.0. Got it? So integer classes can be used at any magnitude, and also we can make use of the default constructor, parameterized constructor, and also we can use the numbers of various formats also in Python to implement